As with any election, there's going to be very specific things that grab your attention. Again, grab your fear or grab your heart. As said in previous videos, there's going to be most likely one main thing or a few main things that influence you, and those things will most likely steer your vote. The question is, what are those things, right? What is that main thing that you care about most? Well, since we've established that the Bible is our final authority, it's not just about what we value or what we like. We have to ask ourselves going into an election season, what's God value? What's God after, right? Don't vote your values, vote God's values. My values, my feelings, they can't always be trusted. God's word can, right? What is big on God's heart in the season? What might be big on his heart on the ballot? Well, before I get into anything specific about voting, let's first acknowledge God's highest value for us in the season. What might that be? Well, I think it becomes abundantly clear in John chapter 17. You know, John 17 is a gift from God, and I don't think I'll be able to emphasize that enough in this video. It is the longest recorded prayer from Jesus in all of the Bible, and we clearly see Jesus' heart as he has a very deep, private, intimate moment with the Father as he prepares himself for the end, as he goes to the cross. You know, I don't know if you've ever spent time with people who know they're at the end, their last moments. They might have hours or days to live. I have done that because of what I do for a living, and it's always amazing to me what people choose to talk about in these moments and what they choose not to talk about. Man, at the very end, I never hear people talk about their net worth. They don't talk about their career, their yacht. They really don't talk about who they voted for. What do they talk about? They talk about people they love. They talk about regrets, whether or not they feel like they answered the call of God on their life, whether they feel like they were generous. It's amazing that in the last moments, what matters the most always rises to the surface. And I always consider that a gift, man, that I got to be a fly on the wall as people pour out their heart. This is why John 17 is such a gift, because we get to be that fly on the wall for that moment for Jesus. The book of John in 17 pulls back the curtain on Jesus' final moment as he pours out his heart to the Father, and he prays for some stuff, right? Right before he goes to the cross, he shares his heart. And here's one thing very specific that Jesus prays for. It's going to be found John chapter 17 in verse 20. He says this, "I'm praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me." That would be us, by the way. That could be you if you give your life to Jesus today or in this season. You can know that at the end, Jesus was thinking about you, and Jesus was praying for you. Verse 21, "I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, I'm in you, and may they be in us, so that the world will believe that you sent me. I have given them glory that you gave me, so that they may be one as we are one. I'm in them, you're in me. May they experience such perfect unity." Really? Unity? Like in 2024? Are you sure, Jesus? Is that a typo? Right? Like all-knowing Jesus is praying this, knowing where the world would be, where culture would be in 2024. And what's he praying for? What's big on his heart? What's he value most for his church in the season? And the answer is unity, right? That there's something more valuable here to Jesus, even than my own opinion, and that's unity. Why? Because there's something more important at stake, and that's spreading the gospel, right? And not being divided by lesser things. We got to prioritize that. And you know who knew that? The early church. Man, you read the book of Acts, it's wild, right? The book of Acts tells the remarkable story of how a group of ordinary people catalyzed the greatest and largest religious movement in the history of the world. And it started with a group of blue-collar guys. We had a fisherman, a boat captain, a carpenter, a med school student, right? A right-wing political activist bunking with a big government IRS agent. I'll get more into that in a minute. This is an interesting group of guys, right? Less like the Avengers, more like the Addams family or something, right? And yet they helped catalyze the largest religious movement in the history of the world. Now nearly 2 billion people claim on the planet to believe in this Jewish carpenter named Jesus. And even if you're not a believer, like that's amazing, right? That's amazing because it's a historic fact. And my question is, how do they do that? How do they do that with no money, no education, no political power, no clear step-by-step process, by the way? Like, how do you make a disciple exactly? What should the church look like exactly? What is ministry? These are all questions in the church today, right? This is the reason why there's a lot of debates and there's denominations and there's division and probably like a lot of other D words, I don't know. But how did they do that? They did it because they had unity, man. Unity over the Spirit's power, unity over the message of Jesus. And whatever they faced, an obstacle, an opposition, a division, this is what they fell back on, right? Whenever they were confronted with questions they couldn't answer, when there was debates that they couldn't win, when they had opposition that rose up against them seemed really big. This is what they fell back. They said, you know what? Jesus rose from the dead, man. Good enough for me. Come on in. And it was faith in that, what I call first thing, ultimate thing, salvation thing, life and death thing, that really unified them. You see, I really believe this, that the early church was known for what they were for. They were more known for what they were for than what they were against. Now, let me ask you, do you still think that's true today about the church? Are we as the church more known for what we're for or what we're against? Sadly, I think perhaps more so than any time in our lives, maybe in history, church folk a lot of times, even people in culture, are more known really not what we're for, but what we're against. Not really known for being for Jesus and for people, but not just what we're against, but who we're against, who our enemy is, man. You look at Facebook and the news, you talk to people for 3 minutes and you're all about Democrats and Republicans. For a while there was vaccinated and unvaccinated and LGBTQers and charismatics and Dodger fans and whatever, like it's all the stuff. And you hear about all these people that we're often against. The truth is there's a lot of division in the church today. There's a lot of drama, right? It's not hard to find. The media loves talking about it, right? All the scandals, all the lies, all the fallen people, all the people who messed it up. We love talking about that. You know, there are people right now online who call themselves Christians, who devote their lives and now have made it a money-making business career to spend their whole life ripping and critiquing pastors and churches. What is that? They will have to answer to God for that, as we all will, right? But why do they do it? They do it because we watch it, right? We eat it up. We love it. We love it. The problem is God hates it, man. God hates division, especially in his church. And it's no wonder why the devil wants to divide us. Why? Here's why. Because the devil knows if our enemy can divide us, our enemy can defeat us. Not for eternity, not for us being with Jesus, but for the here and now as we try to witness to other people. See, we have a common enemy, and it's not each other, actually. It's not people. It's not Kamala Harris. It's not Donald Trump. Our common enemy is not people. I know that every presidential campaign is founded on that, right? It's built on making the other side the enemy. Listen, don't fall for that. Jesus is here to save, love, help people on both sides of the aisle. We have an enemy, and it's not people, it's darkness. And we got to be a church that's for people and against darkness. We got to pray for all people and pray against all darkness around people, right? To spread the gospel, because that's why we're here. But when we're divided, we become ineffective, right? And that's one thing that we let divide us. A big thing we let divide us is politics. And I think the enemy uses politics as much or more than anything else in culture to divide the church. To get this, make our hearts cold towards the world, make our hearts hard towards people we don't agree with. And let me tell you, the most important tool we have to reach the world is a soft heart. Remember that every person, every politician, every pundit we scoff at, Jesus died for. Jesus is praying for. Jesus came for. Therefore, I don't want to use my platform as a pastor for division, which through politics some churches do, right? Who take too strong of a partisan stance on one side or the other, ostracizing large groups of people, taking stances outside of what we're going to talk about in the next video, clear scriptural values, right? To go beyond those, I believe, is a low place for the Church of Jesus to be a pawn on the political chessboard of culture. No, thank you, right? Why? Because we have a much more important eternal message to tell people about. And I don't know about you, but I want people on both sides of the aisle to come here and hear about Jesus. And you know why I want that? Because Jesus wanted that. And I'll prove it to you in something I mentioned earlier. Here's something you maybe have never thought about. Like in the band of 12 disciples, Jesus handpicked guys that he found and he called. One guy was named Simon the Zealot. History tells us that the Zealots were a radical, aggressive political party that wanted to, by any means necessary, rise up against the Roman Empire with violence to succeed and kind of get away from them, right? Oh, and by the way, another guy on Jesus' team is a guy named Matthew, an IRS agent who went around collecting taxes to what? Strengthen the Roman government. Knowing all this, Jesus picks both dudes and says, you're on the same team. How did that work, right? How is that possible? I don't know, but it worked. Why? Because they had a message and a mission that was so much more important to rally around. That for just a moment, right, when we tell people about Jesus, and we come together in church and we worship Jesus, we can put the ballot down, we can put our opinions down, right? Now, were these guys friends? I don't know. Did they hang around and talk politics over kombucha or cold brew? I don't know. I hope so. You know, a lot of Christians don't know how to do that. We got to learn how to do that because we don't know how to do that. Why? Because there's people that don't know Jesus, man, and we don't want to set up any roadblocks for them. I want to read a verse where James, one of the leaders of the church, he's the half-brother of Jesus, in the book of Acts, he's dealing with a dispute in the church. Yeah, there's division, even in Acts. Division in the church been around a long time. And here's something he says, kind of to end this dispute over circumcision, right? Some people thought it was needed for some believers, to come on in. Others knew it wasn't needed to have a relationship with Jesus. Here's what he says, kind of his end-all verdict. Acts chapter 15 and verse 19, he says this, "And so my judgment is this, we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." So simple, man. I think we should engrave that on the side of our building or something, right? Or on our hearts. What should we engrave? We shouldn't make it difficult with our opinions and obstacles and all that. For what? For people to hear about Jesus and come to Jesus and know Jesus. Like by letting our personal opinions get in the way, right? It shouldn't get in the way of loving, praying for, serving, caring for, rooting for people. Don't let politics take our gospel unity. It's a greater priority to Jesus, to spread the message of Jesus, not our political king, our spiritual king, right? Let's be for people and against darkness. Let's be known as a church for what we're for, unity over the love of humanity.